The worst betrayal of my life happened while I was unconscious. My name is James Sullivan, and I woke up from a car accident to discover two devastating truths. My wife Jennifer was having an affair with my doctor, and that same doctor had been using me as a human test subject for illegal drug experiments. For 6 days, Dr. Christopher Vaughn treated me like just another ignorant patient while secretly injecting experimental compounds into my bloodstream. For 6 days, my wife sat beside my hospital bed, holding my hand while coordinating pharmaceutical supplies for her lover's criminal research. For 6 days, they both dismissed my concerns as the paranoid ramblings of a government bureaucrat who couldn't understand real medical innovation. What they didn't know was that this government bureaucrat was a federal pharmaceutical fraud investigator with 16 years of experience destroying doctors who think FDA regulations don't apply to them. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from, because what I'm about to tell you will change how you think about hospital trust forever. Here's how I turned my wife's betrayal into the biggest medical fraud takedown in state history. The condescension started immediately. "Mr. Sullivan," Dr. Vaughn said, checking his tablet without looking at me. "You're a government employee, I see. What department?" "FDA. Pharmaceutical inspector." His eyebrow twitched, just slightly. "Ah, regulatory work." The way he said regulatory made it sound like I collected parking tickets for a living. This was Tuesday, September 19th. I'd been in the hospital for 2 days, and every interaction with Dr. Vaughn felt like being patted on the head by someone who thought I couldn't spell medicine. "Your treatment protocol seems unusual," I mentioned during his Wednesday morning rounds. "The pain medication you've prescribed isn't standard post-accident care." Dr. Vaughn smiled, the kind of smile you give a child who's asked why the sky is blue. "Mr. Sullivan, I don't expect patients to understand complex pharmacological decisions. That's why I went to medical school." Jennifer was sitting beside my bed, nodding along. "Honey, let the doctor do his job." But I'd been doing my job for 16 years. My job was noticing when pharmaceutical protocols didn't match FDA-approved guidelines. My job was asking questions when experimental drug codes appeared on treatment plans. My job was documenting everything. And the documentation was getting interesting. My hospital bill showed medication charges for something called EXP2891, not a standard drug name, not FDA approved. The billing code indicated experimental pharmaceutical trials, but I'd never signed a consent form for any trial participation. I'd specifically asked about all medications during admission. "Dr. Vaughn," I said Thursday morning, "what exactly is EXP2891? "Advanced pain management compound, more effective than traditional opioids." "Is it FDA approved?" Another patronizing smile. "Mr. Sullivan, pharmaceutical regulation moves slowly. Sometimes patients benefit from newer treatments while bureaucrats catch up with paperwork." Bureaucrats. There was that word again. Jennifer squeezed my hand. "James, you're being paranoid. Dr. Vaughn has been incredibly generous with his time." Generous with his time. I was starting to understand exactly how generous. That evening, I called my contact at the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations. Agent Patricia Kowalski and I had worked together on 17 pharmaceutical fraud cases over the past 5 years. We'd secured $12.3 million in penalties and sent 4 executives to federal prison. "Pat, I need you to run a pharmaceutical compound search. EXP2891. "James, are you working a case from the hospital? I might be living in one." 20 minutes later, she called back. "That compound isn't registered with FDA. No clinical trial applications, no investigational drug permits, no documentation anywhere in our system." My wife was having an affair with a doctor who was using me as an unwilling test subject for an illegal drug trial. I started documenting everything, every medication, every conversation. Every time Dr. Vaughn dismissed my questions with that medical school superiority routine. Every time Jennifer told me to trust the experts. But I was an expert. I just wasn't their kind of expert. Friday morning brought another revelation. While reviewing my medical bills, I discovered Jennifer had been listed as my emergency contact for 6 months. Not since the accident. Since March. The same month, Dr. Vaughn started appearing on our bank statements, conference fees, medical education seminars, hotel charges in cities where I'd never been, $23,500 in charges I'd never authorized. Jennifer walked in at visiting hours, carrying coffee for both Dr. Vaughn and herself. They were laughing about something, some inside joke between the smart people. "How are we feeling today?" Dr. Vaughn asked, finally making eye contact. "We're feeling like we'd like to review our treatment plan," I said. "All of it. Mr. Sullivan, I understand your background makes you question medical decisions, but my background makes me question unlawful pharmaceutical testing." The laughter stopped. That Friday evening changed everything. Jennifer left for what she called a pharmaceutical conference dinner. I knew she'd be gone for hours, enough time to do what 16 years of federal investigation experience had taught me to do. Document everything. I started with our joint savings account. Online banking revealed the pattern immediately. Monthly transfers to something called Medicare Educational Services. Always the same amount, always the same date, always coinciding with Jennifer's mysterious weekend commitments. March, $3,400 transfer. Medical Education Conference, Chicago. April, $3,100 transfer. Pharmaceutical Innovation Seminar, Atlanta. May, $4,200 transfer. Advanced Therapeutics Workshop, Miami. 7 months of transfers, $23,500 total, but Medicare Educational Services didn't exist, at least not as any legitimate pharmaceutical education company. I'd investigated enough medical conference scams to recognize shell company names. This was money laundering. The question was, laundering what? My hospital bills provided the first clue. Every medication I'd received was coded as trial pharmaceutical, investigational use. Every treatment session was documented as clinical research data collection. Every blood draw was labeled biomarker analysis for drug efficacy study. I wasn't a patient. I was a test subject. More specifically, I was test subject number 891. That number appeared on everything: my medication schedule, my treatment notes, my blood work orders. Even my meal plan was customized for Subject 891 nutritional requirements during EXP 2891 administration. 891 subjects. This wasn't a small-scale experiment. I called Agent Kowalski from my hospital room phone. "Pat, I need an emergency consultation. How quickly can you run a criminal pharmaceutical investigation?" "James, what have you found?" "Evidence of unlawful human drug trials. Large scale, potentially hundreds of patients." "Are you sure?" I read her the medication codes, the billing classifications, the treatment documentation showing clear clinical trial language without any FDA oversight or patient consent. Jesus, James, if this is real. It's federal prosecution level, multiple felony counts. I'll need everything: documentation, financial records, witness statements. I'm gathering it now, but Pat, there's a complication. What kind of complication? My wife is facilitating the pharmaceutical supply chain, and my attending physician is running the illegal trials. Silence on the phone. Then, "James, you need to be very careful. If they all realize you're investigating..." That's when Jennifer walked back into the room. "Who are you talking to, honey?" she asked, setting down a bag from an expensive restaurant I'd never heard of. "Work call," I said, hanging up. She was glowing, happy in a way I hadn't seen her in months, the way she used to look when we talked about our future together. Now she was talking about her future with someone else. "How was dinner?" I asked. "Educational." Dr. Vaughn explained some fascinating developments in pain management research. "What kind of developments?" "Oh, you wouldn't understand the technical details, but basically they're pioneering new treatments that could revolutionize patient care." "Unauthorized treatments?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Innovative treatments. Sometimes innovation requires flexibility." "Flexibility with FDA regulations?" "James, not everything is about your little government job." My little government job. 16 years investigating pharmaceutical fraud was my little government job. Jennifer, what exactly is your role in these innovative treatments? I help coordinate pharmaceutical samples for research purposes. Without FDA oversight? Without bureaucratic interference? There it was. The same dismissive attitude Dr. Vaughn had been showing me. Government oversight was just bureaucratic interference, getting in the way of their important work. How many patients are involved in this research? That's confidential medical information. 891? Her face went white. How do you... Because I'm on number 891, Jennifer. You and Dr. Vaughn have been using me as a human test subject for an illegal drug trial. She stared at me for a long moment, then laughed. Actually laughed. James, you're being paranoid. This is exactly why I've been spending time with Christopher. He actually saves lives instead of just pushing paperwork around. Christopher. She'd been calling him Christopher. How long have you been having an affair? I'm not having an affair. I'm networking with medical professionals who actually matter. For 6 months? For however long it takes you to understand that some people do work that actually helps humanity. That was her answer. After 12 years of marriage, her answer was that my career protecting patients from pharmaceutical fraud wasn't real work, but I had real work to do now, starting with documenting every word she'd just said. Saturday morning brought Dr. Vaughn's weekend rounds. He was whistling when he walked into my room, actually whistling. Good morning, Mr. Sullivan. How are we responding to treatment? We're responding with questions about unauthorized pharmaceutical testing. The whistling stopped. I'm sorry? EXP-2891, experimental compound, no FDA registration, no investigational drug permit, no patient consent documentation. Dr. Vaughn set down his tablet. Mr. Sullivan, I think there's been some confusion. The confusion is why I've been given an unlawful experimental drug for 6 days without my knowledge or consent. You've been receiving advanced pain management therapy. I've been receiving an unauthorized pharmaceutical compound while being documented as subject number 891 in what appears to be an illegal clinical trial. His jaw tightened. Mr. Sullivan, I don't expect lay people to understand complex pharmacology. I inspect pharmaceutical trials for a living. Government oversight, not actual medicine. There it was, the core of his arrogance. Government oversight wasn't actual medicine. FDA regulation was just bureaucratic interference with his brilliant medical work. Dr. Vaughn, are you currently conducting clinical trials on patients without FDA approval? I'm treating patients with the most advanced therapeutics available. That's not what I asked. Mr. Sullivan, I've been practicing medicine for 15 years. I don't need bureaucrats questioning my clinical decisions. Jennifer walked in carrying 2 coffee cups. One for Dr. Vaughn, one for herself. Nothing for her husband lying in the hospital bed. Good morning, Christopher, she said, handing him the coffee. Good morning, Jennifer. I was just explaining to your husband that his regulatory background doesn't qualify him to evaluate medical treatment protocols. Jennifer nodded. James has always been suspicious of innovation. Suspicious of federal law violations, I corrected. Dr. Vaughn smiled. Federal law moves slowly. Patients need treatment now. Patients need legal treatment. Patients need effective treatment. From authorized physicians conducting lawful clinical trials. Mr. Sullivan, do you see any unauthorized physicians in this room? I see a physician conducting unauthorized drug trials. His smile disappeared completely. Are you accusing me of professional misconduct? I'm stating facts about pharmaceutical regulation compliance. Facts you couldn't possibly understand without medical training. I understand pharmaceutical law perfectly. Government regulation isn't medical science. Jennifer stepped closer to Dr. Vaughn, a subtle but clear positioning, choosing sides. James, you're embarrassing yourself, she said. Am I? Christopher is saving lives while you push papers. I'm protecting patients from physicians who think federal law doesn't apply to them. Dr. Vaughn straightened up. Full authority mode. Mr. Sullivan, I think it's time you understood something. I have 15 years of medical education and clinical experience. You have a government job inspecting paperwork. We are not equals in this conversation. You're right. We're not equals. Exactly. So perhaps you should trust medical professionals to make medical decisions. You've been administering experimental drugs to patients without FDA oversight. I've been treating patients with advanced therapeutics. 891 patients. The color drained from his face. How do you know that number? Because you documented me as subject 891. Long silence. Dr. Vaughn glanced at Jennifer. She looked confused. James, she said, what are you talking about? I reached for the folder beside my bed. 6 days of documentation, medical bills, treatment schedules, medication codes, all showing clear clinical trial language. Every medication I've received is coded as experimental pharmaceutical trial participation. Every treatment is documented as clinical research data collection. Every blood draw is labeled as biomarker analysis for drug efficacy studies. I handed Jennifer the paperwork. You've been giving me unlawful experimental drugs and documenting the results for pharmaceutical research without my consent or FDA approval. She read through the documents. Her confusion turned to understanding, then to something else, fear. Christopher, she said quietly, this looks like advanced medical documentation, he interrupted. This looks like clinical trial paperwork. Jennifer, trust me. Without FDA approval? Dr. Vaughn's voice got sharp. Jennifer, I need you to trust medical professionals instead of regulatory bureaucrats. James isn't a bureaucrat, she said. He's my husband. James is a government inspector who doesn't understand innovative medicine. James investigates pharmaceutical fraud for the federal government. Silence. Dr. Vaughn looked at me with new attention. What exactly do you investigate? Unlawful pharmaceutical testing, unauthorized drug trials, clinical research fraud. And what authority do you have? Federal law enforcement authority. Another silence. Mr. Sullivan, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The misunderstanding is why you thought you could conduct illegal drug trials in a federal inspector's hospital. Jennifer was still reading through the documentation. Christopher, how many patients are involved in this research? That's confidential. 891, I said. James, how do you know that? Because I'm subject number 891, and every subject number indicates a previous test participant. Jennifer looked at Dr. Vaughn. You've been testing experimental drugs on 891 people? I've been treating patients with advanced therapeutics. Without FDA approval? Without bureaucratic delays that prevent patients from receiving effective treatment. Christopher, Jennifer said slowly, that's illegal. That's innovation. She looked at the documentation again, then at me, then at Dr. Vaughn. I need to think about this, she said, and for the first time in 6 days, I saw doubt in my wife's eyes. Part 5. Investigation Power Revealed. 640, 635 words. Sunday morning, I made the call that would change everything. Agent Patricia Kowalski answered on the first ring. James, please tell me you're not calling from the hospital again. Pat, I need to initiate a federal pharmaceutical fraud investigation. How serious are we talking? Unauthorized Phase 2 clinical trials. 891 documented subjects. Unlawful administration of non-FDA approved compounds. Potential violations of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Silence. Then, Jesus Christ, James. It gets worse. The attending physician has been conducting these trials for at least 7 months. The pharmaceutical samples are being supplied through a shell company that's been laundering money through my joint bank account. Your wife is involved? My wife is the pharmaceutical sales representative facilitating illegal drug distribution. James, we need to move carefully here. If they realize you're investigating, they already know something's wrong. I confronted the doctor yesterday. What did you tell him? That I investigate pharmaceutical fraud for the federal government. How did he respond? Like someone who's been caught. Agent Kowalski paused. I could hear her thinking through the legal implications. James, do you have documentation? 6 days of medical records showing clear clinical trial language. Financial records showing $23,000 in suspicious pharmaceutical payments. Hospital billing codes indicating experimental drug administration. That's enough for a preliminary investigation. It's enough for criminal referral to DOJ. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I wasn't getting ahead of myself. I was drawing on 16 years of pharmaceutical fraud investigation experience. 16 years of building federal cases against physicians who thought FDA regulations didn't apply to them. My first major case in 2007, Dr. Raymond Mitchell conducting unauthorized cancer drug trials in Phoenix. 18 months federal investigation, $2.1 million in penalties, medical license revoked. 2011, Biocorp Industries, unlawful Phase 1 trials for experimental cardiac medication, joint FBI-FDA investigation, $3.7 million settlement, 3 executives imprisoned. 2018, Valley Medical Center, systematic billing fraud for non-approved pharmaceutical compounds, 14-month investigation, $6.5 million in recoveries, hospital placed under federal oversight. Dr. Christopher Vaughn wasn't my first arrogant physician. He wasn't even my first physician conducting unlawful drug trials. He was just my first physician stupid enough to conduct unlawful drug trials on a federal pharmaceutical inspector. Pat, I need you to prepare search warrant applications. For what locations? University Medical Center, Dr. Vaughn's office, the pharmaceutical storage facility, and Medicor Industries financial records. James, that's a massive operation. This is a massive violation. How quickly do you need this? Hospital Ethics Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday morning. If we don't move before then, they might destroy evidence. Friday is 4 days away. 4 days to prepare federal search warrants for a multi-location pharmaceutical fraud investigation. Can you gather more evidence before then? I can gather witness testimony. From whom? 890 other patients who've been given experimental drugs without their knowledge or consent. Agent Kowalski whistled quietly. James, if this is as big as it sounds, it's bigger. Dr. Vaughn mentioned pharmaceutical industry connections. This could involve multiple hospitals, multiple physicians, potentially millions in fraudulent research funding. What do you need from me? Coordinate with FBI Healthcare Fraud Unit. Prepare multi-jurisdictional search warrants. Alert the U.S. Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution. And you? I document everything until Friday. James, be careful. If they realize the scope of what you're investigating, they already know I'm suspicious. Now they're about to learn exactly how suspicious a federal pharmaceutical inspector can be. Monday morning, Dr. Vaughn walked into my room with different energy, cautious, watching me carefully. Mr. Sullivan, how are we feeling today? We're feeling curious about Medicor Industries. His hand paused over his tablet. I'm not familiar with that company. The company providing pharmaceutical samples for your research. I don't know what you mean. But his face said he knew exactly what I meant. And his face also said he was starting to understand who he was really dealing with. Friday morning arrived like a storm I'd been tracking for 6 days. Hospital Ethics Committee meeting, conference room B, 3rd floor, 9:30 a.m. sharp. Dr. Vaughn had requested the meeting supposedly to address patient concerns about treatment protocols. What he'd actually done was set up a public forum to humiliate the troublesome government inspector who'd been questioning his medical authority. He had no idea what he'd actually set up. I arrived 15 minutes early. Hospital Ethics Committee meetings were serious business. 7 board members, 3 senior physicians, 2 patient advocates, and a hospital legal representative. Plus, Dr. Vaughn had invited medical students as educational observers. 13 witnesses to what Dr. Vaughn intended to be my professional embarrassment. Jennifer was already seated beside him. United front. She'd spent the week choosing sides, and she'd chosen the side with the medical degree and the impressive office. Mr. Sullivan, Dr. Vaughn began when the meeting was called to order, thank you for joining us today. He was using his formal voice, professional, authoritative, the voice he used when he wanted to remind everyone that he was the doctor and everyone else was just visiting his world. I've called this meeting to address some unusual concerns you've raised about standard medical treatment protocols. Standard. He was calling experimental drug administration standard medical treatment. Dr. Vaughn, I said, I have raised concerns about unlawful pharmaceutical testing. Mr. Sullivan, I understand your background in government regulation makes you skeptical of innovative medical approaches, but my background in pharmaceutical fraud investigation makes me recognize illegal drug trials. Murmurs around the room. The medical students looked confused. The board members looked uncomfortable. Dr. Margaret Hoffman, Chief of Hospital Ethics, leaned forward. Mr. Sullivan, what specifically are you alleging? Administration of experimental pharmaceutical compounds without FDA approval, clinical trial documentation without patient consent, systematic violations of federal pharmaceutical law. Dr. Vaughn smiled. Dr. Hoffman, Mr. Sullivan has been receiving standard post-trauma care. I believe his injury may have affected his ability to understand complex medical procedures. The condescension was perfect. Exactly what I'd been documenting for 6 days, in front of 13 witnesses on Dr. Vaughn, I said. What is EXP-281? An advanced pain management compound. Is it FDA approved? It's clinically effective. That's not what I asked. Mr. Sullivan, FDA approval processes are lengthy and bureaucratic. Patients benefit from innovative treatments. Patients have the right to lawful treatment. Jennifer spoke up. James, you're embarrassing yourself. These people save lives while you push papers around Washington. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Dr. Hoffman looked at the documentation I'd prepared. Mr. Sullivan, can you explain these medical billing codes? Every medication I've received is coded as experimental pharmaceutical trial participation. Every treatment session is documented as clinical research data collection. Every blood draw is labeled as biomarker analysis for drug efficacy study. I handed her 6 days of medical records. I'm documented as subject number 891, which indicates 890 previous test subjects. The room went quiet. Dr. Riveting. Hoffman read through the paperwork. Dr. Vaughn, can you explain this clinical trial language? Advanced medical documentation standards. For what kind of clinical trials? There are no clinical trials. Mr. Sullivan is receiving standard care. Then why is he documented as subject 891? Dr. Vaughn's confidence wavered slightly. Medical record keeping can be technical. Dr. Vaughn, said Dr. Patricia Way, senior board member, are you conducting pharmaceutical research on patients without ethics committee approval? I'm treating patients with the most effective available therapeutics. That's not what I asked. Dr. Way, I've been practicing medicine for 15 years. I don't conduct unauthorized research. What research do you conduct? I asked. Standard medical treatment isn't research. Experimental pharmaceutical testing is research. I don't conduct experimental pharmaceutical testing. You've administered EXP-2891 to 891 patients. I've treated patients with advanced pain management protocols. Dr. Hoffman looked up from the documentation. Dr. Vaughn, this paperwork clearly indicates clinical trial participation, blood work for drug efficacy analysis, biomarker collection for pharmaceutical research. Mr. Sullivan misunderstands medical terminology. Mr. Sullivan, Dr. Hoffman asked, what is your professional background? Pharmaceutical fraud investigator, FDA Office of Criminal Investigations, 16 years investigating unlawful drug trials. The room went completely silent. Dr. Vaughn's face went white. You investigate pharmaceutical fraud? Dr. Hoffman asked. Federal pharmaceutical fraud, unauthorized clinical trials, unlawful administration of non-approved compounds. How many cases have you worked? 237 cases, 12 million in penalties recovered, 43 medical licenses revoked. Jennifer was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Dr. Vaughn cleared his throat. Dr. Hoffman, I think Mr. Sullivan's regulatory background is creating unnecessary suspicion about routine medical care. Dr. Vaughn, I said, how many patients are currently receiving EXP-2891? That's confidential medical information. How many patients have been documented as research subjects without their consent? No patients are research subjects. 891 patients are documented as research subjects. Dr. Way leaned forward. Dr. Vaughn, we need clear answers. Are you conducting pharmaceutical research? I'm providing innovative patient care. With FDA oversight? FDA oversight isn't required for standard medical treatment. It's required for experimental pharmaceutical testing. There is no experimental pharmaceutical testing. I pulled out my phone. Agent Kowalski, can you join us in conference room B? Dr. Vaughn looked confused. Who is Agent Kowalski? FBI Healthcare Fraud Unit. The door opened. Agent Patricia Kowalski walked in, carrying a federal badge and a very serious expression. Dr. Vaughn, she said, I'm Agent Kowalski, FBI Healthcare Fraud Unit. Inspector Sullivan has been working with our office on a preliminary investigation into potential pharmaceutical law violations. The medical students looked fascinated. The board members looked terrified. Dr. Vaughn looked like he wanted to disappear. Jennifer whispered, James, what have you done? I've documented federal crimes, I said. Agent Kowalski continued, Dr. Vaughn, we need to discuss your pharmaceutical research activities. I don't conduct pharmaceutical research. You've administered experimental compounds to 891 patients without FDA oversight. That's medical treatment. It's unlawful pharmaceutical testing. Dr. Hoffman stood up. I think we need to suspend this ethics committee meeting and contact our legal department immediately. Actually, Agent Kowalski said, we need to continue this conversation downtown. She looked directly at Dr. Vaughn. Dr. Christopher Vaughn, you're under federal investigation for violations of pharmaceutical law. You have the right to remain silent. Jennifer grabbed my arm. James, stop this. You can't do this to Christopher. I'm not doing anything to Christopher. Christopher did this to himself. These people saved lives. These people broke federal law. James, you're destroying everything. I'm protecting patients. And for the first time in 6 days, Dr. Vaughn had nothing to say. The Miranda warning echoed through conference room B like a death sentence for Dr. Vaughn's medical career. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in federal court. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Agent Kowalski's voice was steady, professional. She'd done this hundreds of times. But the medical students watching from the back of the room looked like they were witnessing a medical school nightmare come to life. Dr. Vaughn found his voice. This is ridiculous. I haven't committed any crimes. Dr. Vaughn, I said, standing up from my wheelchair, you've administered experimental pharmaceutical compounds to 891 patients without FDA approval, without informed consent, and without lawful clinical trial oversight. That's medical treatment. That's felony violation of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Agent Kowalski opened her folder. Dr. Vaughn, Inspector Sullivan has been documenting pharmaceutical law violations for 6 days. We now have probable cause for federal search warrants. Search warrants for what? University Medical Center pharmaceutical storage, your office computers, Medicor Industries financial records, patient medical files for all 891 documented research subjects. Jennifer stood up shakily. This isn't happening. Jennifer, I said, you've been facilitating illegal pharmaceutical distribution through Medicor Industries for 7 months. I've been coordinating medical samples. You've been laundering money for unlawful drug trials. Agent Kowalski nodded. Mrs. Sullivan will also need to discuss your role in this pharmaceutical fraud conspiracy. My role? $23,500 in suspicious transfers to shell companies facilitating illegal pharmaceutical research. Jennifer's face went completely white. Dr. Hoffman, the ethics committee chair, was frantically taking notes. Agent Kowalski, what exactly are the allegations? Systematic pharmaceutical fraud, unlawful administration of experimental drugs, clinical research without federal oversight, potential violations carrying penalties of up to 20 years federal imprisonment, and $15 million in fines. The medical students in the back were whispering to each other. One was recording everything on his phone. Dr. Vaughn tried to regain control. This is all a misunderstanding. Mr. Sullivan doesn't understand innovative medical protocols. Dr. Vaughn, Agent Kowalski said, Inspector Sullivan has investigated pharmaceutical fraud for 16 years. His pharmaceutical expertise exceeds yours. He's a government bureaucrat. He's a federal law enforcement officer with specialized expertise in exactly the crimes you've been committing. I pulled out my FDA credentials. Dr. Vaughn, I'm GS-13 Federal Investigator, Office of Criminal Investigations. I hold law enforcement authority specifically for pharmaceutical fraud cases. The room went dead silent. You've been conducting illegal drug trials on a federal pharmaceutical inspector. Dr. Vaughn stared at my badge like it was a cobra. Inspector Sullivan, Agent Kowalski continued, has successfully prosecuted 237 pharmaceutical fraud cases. His investigations have resulted in $12 million in recovered penalties and 43 revoked medical licenses. Dr. Patricia Way, the senior board member, looked stunned. Mr. Sullivan, Inspector Sullivan, you're federal law enforcement? Pharmaceutical fraud investigator, and Dr. Vaughn has been documenting his crimes in my medical records for 6 days. I handed her the complete evidence file. Every medication administration, every clinical trial notation, every research data collection entry, all documented violations of federal pharmaceutical law. Dr. Hoffman was reading through the evidence. This is incredibly damaging. This is federal prosecution evidence, Agent Kowalski said. Inspector Sullivan's medical records constitute a complete criminal case file. Jennifer finally found her voice. James, how long have you been investigating this? Since Tuesday, when I realized you'd been having an affair with a doctor conducting illegal drug trials. You've been investigating me? I've been investigating pharmaceutical fraud. You and Dr. Vaughn just happened to be committing it. Agent Kowalski's radio crackled. Agent Kowalski, search teams are in position. She keyed the radio. Execute search warrants, all locations. Dr. Vaughn looked panicked. What search warrants? Federal search warrants for University Medical Center, your office, your home computer, and Medicor Industries financial records. You can't do that. Federal judges disagree. Agent Kowalski's phone buzzed. She answered, listened for a moment, then smiled grimly. Inspector Sullivan, the pharmaceutical storage search just found 12,000 doses of EXP-2891. No FDA documentation, no approved clinical trial permits, no legal authority for patient administration. How much is 12,000 doses worth? Dr. Hoffman asked. Street value approximately $1.8 million, I said. Federal penalty exposure approximately $15 million. The medical students in the back were openly staring now. This was definitely not in their textbooks. Dr. Vaughn made one last desperate attempt. Inspector Sullivan, surely we can discuss this professionally. Medical colleagues supporting medical innovation. Dr. Vaughn, I'm not your medical colleague. I'm the federal investigator who's been building a criminal case against you for 6 days. James, Jennifer pleaded, you can't destroy Christopher's career over a misunderstanding. I'm not destroying his career. He destroyed his career when he decided federal law didn't apply to him. Agent Kowalski received another call. The computer search just found patient files for 891 research subjects, detailed pharmaceutical testing data, biomarker analysis, drug efficacy reports, complete clinical trial documentation. All without FDA approval, I added. All without patient consent, Agent Kowalski continued. Dr. Way looked sick. How many patients are we talking about? 891 documented test subjects over 7 months. All receiving experimental drugs? All receiving unlawful experimental drugs administered by a physician who believed government oversight was just bureaucratic interference. Dr. Vaughn's superior attitude had completely evaporated. Inspector Sullivan, what happens now? Now you face federal prosecution for pharmaceutical fraud. What are the penalties? Up to 20 years federal imprisonment, up to $15 million in fines, permanent revocation of medical license, criminal record for felony pharmaceutical law violations. And Jennifer? I looked at my wife, who'd spent 6 months telling me that real doctors mattered more than government bureaucrats. Jennifer faces conspiracy charges for facilitating unlawful pharmaceutical distribution. James, she whispered, I didn't know. You knew it was innovative medicine that avoided bureaucratic delays. I didn't know that meant illegal. You knew it meant avoiding FDA oversight. I thought that meant avoiding unnecessary paperwork. FDA oversight isn't unnecessary paperwork. It's federal law. Agent Kowalski checked her watch. Inspector Sullivan, we should conclude this interview. Dr. Vaughn needs to come downtown for formal processing. Processing? Booking, fingerprinting, federal arraignment. Dr. Vaughn looked around the room desperately. 13 witnesses to his complete professional destruction. Medical students who'd watched a respected physician become a federal criminal in 30 minutes. This isn't how this was supposed to go, he said quietly. This is exactly how federal pharmaceutical law works, I said. You just never expected to conduct illegal drug trials on someone who enforces federal pharmaceutical law. Jennifer was crying now. James, what about us? Us? Our marriage. You spent 6 months having an affair while facilitating federal crimes. What about our marriage do you think survives that? I made mistakes. You made felonious choices. Agent Kowalski stood up. Dr. Vaughn, we need to go. Now? Federal custody doesn't wait for convenient timing. As they walked toward the door, Dr. Vaughn turned back one last time. Inspector Sullivan, I hope you understand that my intentions were to help patients. Dr. Vaughn, federal pharmaceutical law doesn't recognize good intentions as a defense for criminal violations. But I was trying to save lives. You were trying to play God with experimental drugs and federal regulations. Now you get to explain that to a federal judge. The door closed behind them. Conference room B sat in stunned silence. Finally, Dr. Hoffman spoke. Inspector Sullivan, what happens to the 891 patients? Full medical review, discontinuation of experimental drugs, monitoring for adverse effects, and compensation for unlawful medical testing. What happens to the hospital? Federal oversight, massive penalties, potential criminal charges for institutional leadership. What about Medicor Industries? Complete federal investigation, asset seizure, criminal prosecution for pharmaceutical distribution fraud. I looked around the room at 13 witnesses who'd just watched systematic federal law enforcement in action. Any questions about government bureaucracy? Nobody had any questions. The federal prosecution moved with the methodical precision of 16 years of pharmaceutical fraud experience. Tuesday morning, 1 week after the Ethics Committee meeting, U.S. Attorney's Office filed formal criminal charges. Dr. Conway. Christopher Vaughn faced 14 felony counts under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Jennifer faced 8 conspiracy charges for facilitating unlawful pharmaceutical distribution. The charges were specific, professional, devastating. Count 1, unlawful administration of experimental pharmaceutical compounds to 891 patients without FDA approval. Count 2, clinical research fraud through systematic falsification of patient consent documentation. Count 3, wire fraud through electronic transmission of false pharmaceutical billing codes. Count 4, money laundering through shell company financial transfers totaling $1.8 million. Each count carried maximum penalties of 20 years, federal imprisonment, and $5 million in fines. The evidence was overwhelming because Dr. Vaughn had documented his own crimes for 7 months. Agent Kowalski presented the criminal referral to federal prosecutors with surgical precision, 847 pages of pharmaceutical testing documentation, complete financial records for Medicor Industries, shell company operations, digital records from Dr. Vaughn's computers showing systematic patient exploitation, my medical files providing real-time documentation of federal law violations. Wednesday brought the pharmaceutical industry consequences. Medicor Industries stock collapsed. Opening price, $47 per share. Closing price, $12 per share. Market capitalization loss, $152 million in one trading day. Pharmaceutical companies don't survive federal criminal investigations. Investors don't tolerate FDA enforcement actions. Medicor Industries faced complete business dissolution within 60 days. Thursday delivered the medical licensing consequences. Colorado State Medical Board emergency session. Dr. Vaughn's medical license suspended immediately pending criminal resolution. Hospital admitting privileges revoked permanently. Pharmaceutical prescribing authority terminated indefinitely. 15 years of medical education gone. 15 years of clinical practice finished. 15 years of professional reputation destroyed. Friday brought the hospital consequences. University Medical Center faced federal oversight through the Department of Health and Human Services. All pharmaceutical research suspended. Complete audit of medication protocols. Mandatory implementation of federal compliance monitoring. Financial penalties. $2.1 million fine for institutional failure to prevent illegal drug trials. Insurance rate increases. 45% premium surcharge for healthcare facilities with federal enforcement actions. Legal liability, $890,000 settlement fund for 891 patients subjected to unlawful experimental drug testing. The mathematics of justice were precise, but the personal consequences were more complex. Jennifer moved out of our house Saturday morning. 12 years of marriage ended with a U-Haul truck and a forwarding address to her sister's apartment in Portland. "James," she said, loading her final box, "I need you to know I never intended for any of this to happen. You intended to have an affair while facilitating pharmaceutical fraud. I intended to network with medical professionals. You intended to choose someone you thought was more important than your husband. I thought Christopher was saving lives. Christopher was exploiting patients for pharmaceutical research. I know that now. You knew it when you told me government oversight was just bureaucratic interference." She paused at the truck. "What happens to me legally?" "Plea negotiation with federal prosecutors. Probably suspended sentence with community service if you cooperate fully." "What happens to us personally?" "There is no U.S. personally. You chose a criminal over your husband. That choice has consequences." "James, I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't restore 12 years of marriage trust. Can you ever forgive me?" "Jennifer, forgiveness is personal. Federal prosecution is professional. Right now, I'm focused on professional." Monday morning brought the final medical consequences. Dr. Vaughn's federal arraignment. Federal courthouse, downtown Denver. Judge Patricia Martinez presiding. 27 years federal judicial experience. "Dr. Vaughn," Judge Martinez said, reading the charges, "you've been accused of conducting systematic pharmaceutical fraud affecting 891 patients over 7 months. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." "Mr. Vaughn, are you aware that one of your alleged victims is a federal pharmaceutical inspector who documented your alleged crimes in real time?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Are you aware that your alleged crimes are documented in federal medical records that constitute a complete criminal case file?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Are you confident in your not guilty plea?" Long pause. "Yes, Your Honor. Bail is set at $500,000. Trial date scheduled for March 15th. Dr. Vaughn, you are remanded to federal custody pending bail posting." Federal marshals led Dr. Vaughn away in handcuffs. The case would never reach trial. Federal pharmaceutical fraud cases, with complete documentation, rarely require jury proceedings. 6 weeks later, plea agreement. Dr. Vaughn pleaded guilty to 7 felony counts. Sentencing, 42 months federal prison, $5 million in penalties, permanent medical license revocation, lifetime prohibition from pharmaceutical industry employment. Jennifer's plea agreement, 18 months, suspended sentence, 200 hours community service, full cooperation with ongoing pharmaceutical fraud investigations, Medicor Industries, complete corporate dissolution, asset forfeiture, criminal charges against 3 executives, University Medical Center, federal monitoring for 5 years, complete pharmaceutical protocol overhaul, mandatory compliance training for all medical staff. The case became a textbook example in federal pharmaceutical law enforcement training. But for me, it was just Tuesday morning, returning to work. 6 months later, the ripple effects of Dr. Vaughn's pharmaceutical fraud investigation had reshaped medical practice across 3 states. My desk at the FDA Office of Criminal Investigations looked exactly the same. Same government-issued computer, same stack of pharmaceutical fraud case files, same view of downtown Denver through the same unwashed windows. But everything else had changed. Inspector Sullivan, my supervisor, Director Raymond Clark, said during my Monday morning briefing, "Your University Medical Center case has generated 17 additional pharmaceutical fraud investigations." 17? Hospitals in Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, all conducting similar experimental drug programs, all claiming medical innovation while violating federal pharmaceutical law. The mathematics were staggering. Dr. Vaughn's illegal drug trials weren't isolated medical misconduct. They were part of a systematic network of physicians who believed FDA oversight didn't apply to their medical genius. How many patients affected? Preliminary estimates suggest over 4,000 individuals received experimental drugs without consent or FDA approval. 4,000 people. 4,000 families who trusted medical professionals to follow federal law. 4,000 patients who became unwitting test subjects for ambitious doctors and pharmaceutical companies. What's the total financial impact? Estimated pharmaceutical company losses, $47 million. Hospital penalties, $12 million. Criminal prosecutions pending, 36 cases. Agent Patricia Kowalski knocked on my office door. James, we need to discuss your congressional testimony. Congressional testimony? House Subcommittee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. They want you to explain how one pharmaceutical fraud case uncovered a nationwide network of illegal drug trials. When? Next Thursday, Washington, D.C., full committee hearing. I'd testified before Congress twice in my career. Once about pharmaceutical import fraud in 2015, once about clinical trial data manipulation in 2019, but never about a case where I'd been both the federal investigator and the victim. What do they want to know? How federal pharmaceutical inspectors can protect patients from physicians who think they're above federal law. Wednesday evening brought a different kind of consequence. My doorbell rang at 7:30 p.m. I opened it to find Dr. Patricia Way, the senior board member from University Medical Center Ethics Committee. Inspector Sullivan, I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced. Dr. Way, what can I do for you? I wanted to thank you personally. Thank me? For protecting our patients from Dr. Vaughn's illegal drug trials. She looked older than she had 6 months ago. The hospital federal investigation had aged everyone in medical administration. Dr. Way, I was just doing my job. Your job was investigating pharmaceutical fraud. Our job was protecting patients. We failed. You succeeded. The hospital failed because you trusted a physician who claimed government oversight was bureaucratic interference. We failed because we didn't verify his pharmaceutical protocols met federal standards. Dr. Vaughn was very convincing about medical innovation requiring regulatory flexibility. Medical innovation requires federal compliance, not regulatory avoidance. She handed me an envelope. This is from the 891 patients who were subjected to Dr. Vaughn's experimental drug trials. They wanted to express their gratitude. Inside was a letter signed by hundreds of names. People who'd been given experimental drugs without their knowledge. People who'd trusted medical professionals to follow federal law. Inspector Sullivan, the letter read, thank you for protecting patients when medical professionals forgot their responsibilities. Thank you for showing that government oversight isn't bureaucratic interference. It's patient protection. Thursday brought professional consequences I hadn't expected. Inspector Sullivan, Director Clark announced during our weekly staff meeting, you've been promoted to Senior Investigator, GS-14, effective immediately. Sir, your University Medical Center case demonstrated exceptional federal pharmaceutical law enforcement. Congress has requested you lead a new task force investigating systematic pharmaceutical fraud in medical institutions. What kind of task force? Joint FDA-FBI operation, 15 investigators, 5-year mandate, congressional funding for comprehensive pharmaceutical fraud enforcement. What's our target? Physicians and pharmaceutical companies who believe federal law doesn't apply to medical innovation. How many potential cases? Intelligence suggests systematic pharmaceutical fraud in 47 hospitals across 12 states. The scope was overwhelming. Dr. Vaughn's arrogance had exposed a nationwide network of medical professionals who viewed FDA oversight as optional bureaucracy rather than mandatory patient protection. Friday evening, I received a call from an unexpected source. Inspector Sullivan, this is Dr. Amanda Foster, Chief of Medical Ethics at Denver General Hospital. Dr. Foster, how can I help you? I wanted to discuss our pharmaceutical protocols. We want to ensure complete federal compliance. What specifically concerns you? Everything. After watching what happened to Dr. Vaughn and University Medical Center, we're reviewing every experimental treatment protocol for federal law compliance. That's wise. Inspector Sullivan, Could you conduct a voluntary pharmaceutical compliance audit of our hospital? You want FDA investigation of your medical practices? We want FDA verification that our medical practices follow federal law. The irony was perfect. 6 months ago, Dr. Vaughn had dismissed government oversight as bureaucratic interference. Now, hospitals were requesting federal investigation to prove they weren't conducting illegal drug trials. Dr. Foster, I'll schedule a compliance review for next month. Thank you, Inspector Sullivan. We'd rather have federal investigators confirm we're following pharmaceutical law than federal prosecutors prove we weren't. Medical professionals were finally understanding the difference between government oversight and government prosecution. The difference was whether they chose compliance or arrogance. Dr. Vaughn had chosen arrogance. His choice had consequences. 1 year later, I stood in the same hospital where everything started, not as a patient, as a federal investigator, conducting pharmaceutical compliance training for medical staff who wanted to understand how FDA oversight actually protects patients instead of bureaucratic interference with medical innovation. The fundamental principle, I explained to 47 physicians and nurses, is that experimental pharmaceutical compounds require federal approval before patient administration. Not after, not eventually, before. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the new chief of emergency medicine, raised her hand. Inspector Sullivan, how do we balance medical innovation with federal compliance? You don't balance them. You integrate them. Medical innovation through lawful pharmaceutical research. Federal compliance through proper clinical trial protocols. What about urgent medical situations? Federal law provides emergency pharmaceutical protocols. The key is following them instead of ignoring them. The questions were serious, professional, respectful. No one dismissed government oversight as bureaucratic interference. No one claimed medical education exempted them from federal law. Dr. Vaughn's prosecution had educated medical professionals about the consequences of pharmaceutical arrogance. After the training session, I walked past room bed 4, the same room where I'd discovered my wife's affair and uncovered systematic pharmaceutical fraud. The bed was occupied by a different patient, an elderly woman recovering from hip surgery, standard post-operative care, FDA-approved medications, proper documentation, legal treatment, everything Dr. Vaughn should have provided. My phone buzzed. Text message from Agent Kowalski. Congressional Pharmaceutical Fraud Task Force just secured another conviction, Dr. Betrayal. Rebecca Torres, Phoenix General Hospital. 18 months federal prison for unauthorized drug trials. Your University Medical Center case provided the investigative template. 18 months prison. Medical license revocation. Professional reputation destroyed. Career finished. The consequences of believing federal law doesn't apply to medical innovation. I drove home to an empty house. Jennifer and I had finalized our divorce 4 months ago. 12 years of marriage ended with legal paperwork and asset division. Some betrayals don't heal. Some trust doesn't restore. But boundaries do clarify. My boundary now was simple. Federal pharmaceutical law applies to everyone. Medical degree, government position, personal relationship, professional authority. None of that exempts anyone from federal compliance. Dr. Vaughn learned that lesson in federal prison. Jennifer learned that lesson in divorce court. Medical professionals across 3 states learned that lesson through mandatory pharmaceutical compliance training. And I learned that protecting patients isn't just federal responsibility, it's personal calling. Have you ever had your expertise dismissed by someone who thought their education made them immune to consequences? Have you ever discovered that people you trusted were exploiting the system you worked to protect? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and whether you think government oversight protects people or interferes with innovation. Because sometimes the most important cases start with the most personal betrayals. And sometimes federal law enforcement is the only way to restore trust in the institutions that should have protected us in the first place.